Today, I want to show proof that the afterlife is real and that heaven and hell are real.
They called a code and they come running in. I was above my body. I could see them doing chest compressions. I could see them, all the nurses around. I could smell the most beautiful flowers I've ever smelled. And then I heard music. When I opened my eyes, I knew where I was. I knew I was in heaven.
In 2019, Charlotte Holmes was having a routine checkup with her cardiologist when her blood pressure spiked to 234 over 134.
My heart doctor said, "You're not going home. We're going to put you in the hospital. We've got to get that blood pressure down. It's got to come down. You're having another stroke or you're going to have a heart attack." They put me in a room and started an IV just to, try to get that blood pressure down.
Charlotte's husband, Danny, stayed with her while the hospital staff tended to her.
Immediately, they call this code and everybody started rushing in. They just started working on her. And my feelings was, I thought, well, I'm wondering if I'm even going to be able to bring her home.
Charlotte began describing things to Danny.
She started talking about the flowers. Well, I looked around and I knew there was no flowers in that room. That's when I knew she was not in this world when that was going on.
Charlotte's heart stopped. For the next 11 minutes, she was clinically dead.
I was above my body. I could see Danny standing in the corner. He had backed up. I could see them, all the nurses around. Then I opened my eyes. I looked around at the beauty. I could see the trees. I could see the grass. And everything was swaying with the music because everything in heaven worships God. I can't convey to you what heaven looked like because it's so above what you could even imagine a million times.
Charlotte says she was led into heaven by angels.
There's no fear. It's like pure joy. When the angels takes over, there's no fear. When you're going home, it's pure joy.
She says she then began to recognize deceased family members.
I seen my mom. I seen my dad. I seen my sister. I seen family members standing behind. I seen saints of old. See, they didn't look old. They didn't look sick. None of them wore glasses. They looked like they were in their 30s. But yet it says in the scriptures, we will be known as we were known. I knew them there in their new bodies. They looked wonderful.
What Charlotte saw after that, however, shocked her.
Standing behind my mom and dad was a light so bright. I couldn't look upon it. I mean, it was so bright. But I knew it was my Heavenly Father. Seen a toddler. And that toddler, I couldn't understand. And I can remember thinking, who is this? And I heard my father say to me, my Heavenly Father say to me, it's your child. I lost that child. I was 5.5 months pregnant. I can remember them holding the baby up and saying, Charlotte, it's a boy. Then he was gone. So when I seen this toddler, I said, God, how is that possible? He says, they continue to grow in heaven, but there's no time. It's eternity. So 48 years, and here my child, our child, is a toddler.
Then God chose to show her one more thing.
God took me to the edge of hell. And I looked down and the smell, and then rotten flesh. That's what it smelled like, and screams. After seeing the beauty of heaven, the contrast to seeing hell is almost unbearable. And he says, I show you this to tell you. If some of them do not change their ways, this is where they shall reside. I heard my father say, you have time to go back and share.
As quickly as she had gone to heaven, Charlotte's spirit came back.
I felt myself being drawn into my body. I felt the pain, where I hadn't felt pain. I felt the sorrow. Danny said that they come running in and your eye blinked. And he said, I knew then I was going to get to bring you home.
Charlotte made a full.
Okay. So this is an example of somebody who has the near-death experience is a preview, is where you will end up, um, where you will end up when you pass away. So when that woman, whose name is Charla, when she passes away, she will be like in heaven with her deceased family member and a child that she lost in a pregnancy. So this is what, and then there's multiple example of people saying that they went to heaven or hell. Like another example. So this is she died. She visited heaven. So this is
Dr. Mary Neal, you went.
so this is an example of someone who say that she went to heaven. And then there is a YouTuber that go by top fives near death experience. Hold on, I'm trying to. So these are I died, I saw Jesus. So
What happens to us after we die? Do we go to a magical land where we meet up with all of our past relatives, friends, and pets? Are we reincarnated and have literally. Mickey Robinson. Mickey Robinson was a professional skydiver who loved nothing more than falling from.
So Mickey Robinson was somebody who's an atheist, but when he had that near-death experience, he was like in a dark place, and then he screamed God for a chance, and then he was taken to heaven.
The sky. Those 60 seconds of freefall, followed by a serene parachute descent, became, by his own admission, an obsession. That was until one August afternoon in 1968 when all that changed. Mickey and 5 other men, 3 professionals and 2 students, took off to make a relatively routine parachute jump. Flying conditions were not ideal due to the intense heat on the day, but
I'm not
being
gonna
highly
play the whole thing.
experienced,
I'm
Mickey
only
was
gonna play
confident.
a
Shortly after
couple minutes.
takeoff, there was an eerie silence in the plane, and it became apparent that something was seriously wrong. The engine had stalled. The pilot turned to Mickey and said, "That's it, we're going down," and the plane plummeted to earth and smashed into the ground at over 100 miles per hour. Despite the initial impact, 3 of the men on board managed to escape, and the 4th also managed to scramble free, assuming that the pilot and Mickey had also survived and were making their escape. But as the 4th man left, the plane burst into flames, with Mickey and the pilot still inside. As one of the men saw Mickey engulfed in flames, trapped and trying to get free, he went back and ripped Mickey's trapped parachute cord with his bare hands, pulling his thumbs out of their sockets and dragging a completely ablaze Mickey from the wreckage. Sadly for the pilot, it was too late and he burnt to death. Mickey was so severely burned, it was a miracle he even made it to the hospital. After his clothes were cut off, it was discovered he had sustained third-degree burns to nearly half of his body, some of the burns going down to the bone. In hospital, his entire body became infected, he was skeletal, and his skin was ulcerating and rotting. To top things off, no painkiller could touch the agony he was experiencing. Despite him putting up a fight, it was a losing battle. His body was dying piece by piece, and doctors could do no more for him. As he drifted in and out of consciousness, his family were asked to say their goodbyes. As he lay dying, Mickey recalls the agony and the discomfort of having a ridiculously high temperature, but then something happened. He no longer felt he was in hospital and believes he had entered into the realm of a spirit world. He was transported from his burnt, wrecked body into a place of pureness. In this moment, he was no longer in pain and his body was no longer burned. Then he felt he was being sucked into a wall of blackness that he knew if he went into, he would never come out and be gone forever. At this point, Mickey began to scream to God for a second chance, someone he said he had never served in his life. Instantaneously, he was transported to what he believed was heaven. He said he felt the power of God all around him and could see a golden river in front of him passing through his body. He said his thoughts were nothing like they are on earth, and it was an incredible feeling of pure bliss. Then, in an unfamiliar language, Mickey believes that someone told him he was going back to Earth, and he felt as if he was being reeled back into his body. As his senses returned, he came back to consciousness and realized he was still alive in the hospital bed. As Mickey can walk, he slowly started to recover, and although unfunctioning, Betty Edie from the mind.
And then he's the one who wrote the book Falling to Heaven, and That's pretty much it. And then these are people who had an out of body experience. They said that they went to heaven.
and could see her own. She initially was reluctant to speak about what happened.
So this is what this video is about. I'm not going to play the whole thing. And then um, there's some people who did not have a pleasant near-death experience. So this woman, for example, she said that she died and then she went to hell, and then she described what happened. So not everybody are gonna make it to heaven. There's some people who are going to make it, are going to go to hell, and this is how I define near-death experience. Near-death experience, it's it's an indicator what you will end up when you pass away. So the woman from the 700 Club video that I played that said that she was in heaven, she was able to recognize all her deceased family member, and then her child who she lost during her pregnancy. This is where she will end up when she passes away. So the same thing can apply to a lot of people. Like, for example, Beverly Burr's mother. So, so her daughter, back in August of 1961, mysteriously vanished. And she passed away at 80 years old without ever knowing what happened to her daughter. And her husband passed away at 77 years old without also knowing what happened to to the daughter who mysteriously vanished in her Tacoma home. And then before Ted Bundy was executed, um, he denied any involvement for her daughter's disappearance. She was raised Catholic and she raised her four or five children. And the child that they adopted after her biological daughter Anne Marie vanished, Laura, as Catholic. The same thing can apply to her. So she passed away in 2008. It is a possibility that she is reunited with her daughter Anne Marie, who um, who mysteriously vanished. The same thing applied with Deborah Kent. So her daughter also was abducted by Ted Bundy in Utah, and she passed away at 86 years old in 2023. God will make it able for them to reunite. Um, so So these near-death experiences is just an indicator of what will happen when you pass away. And that YouTuber Top 5, he made a video of the list of people who went to heaven. Oh, my bad. This is not what I wanted. And then he made a list of video of people who went to hell. Trying to find. So
Witchcraft.
So
Kelly
this is somebody who practiced witchcraft, and then he was a near-death experience, and he said he went to hell.
was the seventh of experiences and supposedly went to hell. Not everyone's near-death experience has been positive. There are many well-known cases of people dying and visiting a place far more disturbing and frightening. They've described it as hell. These experiences have been known to change a person's whole outlook on life. And here are 5 people who had near-death experiences and supposedly went to hell. Sit back and enjoy. Curtis Earthquake Kelly. Curtis Kelly was a bishop and former professional boxer with a troubled past. He was raised by a devout Christian mother and an alcoholic father who practiced in voodoo and other forms of witchcraft. Kelly was the 7th of 11 children, and as a child, he was abused by his father and exposed to drug use by his older brothers from the age of 4. As he grew older, he lived a life of crime and witchcraft, and according to Kelly, he always felt a dark presence around him, especially when he performed witchcraft. His mother frequently prayed for her troubled son. But at the age of just 15, his lifestyle caught up with him when he was in a bar and overdosed on a combination of cocaine, pills, and alcohol. As the lethal concoction took over his body, he recalls he saw the ground open up and a black hooded spirit drag him down. He begged his brother to drive him home, but during the car ride, he actually died in the back seat. He felt the spirits yank him out of his body and take him to a dark, reddish pit, where he saw snakes, demons, and other terrifying things. He heard screams, laughter, and voices saying that they had set him up and tricked him. Demons surrounded him, hitting and scratching him non-stop. At one point, they let him run away, only to chase after him for further torment. However, just as all hope seemed lost, the demons suddenly stopped, and from above, Kelly saw an immense white light and 2 giant hands that reached out to grab him. The hands then placed him back into his body. When he awoke in a hospital, he heard a voice say, "Because of your mother's prayers, and because you were chosen to do a work for us, you were saved." He believed this voice was from God. Since the experience, he has dedicated his life to spreading the word of God as a bishop. He also became a professional boxer, where he earned his nickname, Earthquake. Veronica Barthel. Veronica Barthel was also someone who experienced a rough childhood. From an early age, she was abused by her stepfather, and she recalls that she was not allowed to cry in front of him, or she would be punished. However, her Christian faith kept her strong, and in her darkest hours, she would pray. But things got too much, and at the age of just 7, she ran away from home to live with her grandmother. During this time, she relinquished her faith and even attempted suicide. Then one stormy night, as she drove home from a party, something odd happened. The belt from the passenger's side seat was hanging out of the car door, and the metal buckle was struck by lightning. Veronica screamed, "Jesus help me, I don't want to die." She later described how she left her physical body, and as she looked down, she saw her burned hands gripped on the steering wheel. She then entered a tunnel with a big gate that read, "Welcome in Hell." She could smell a strong odor that made it hard for her to breathe, and she was then confronted by demons who marched past her and could hear cries from people screaming in agony, asking God to save them. The demons were throwing spears at these people.
So these are the people who went to hell. I play a snippet of one of his video, the first one that said the people who went to heaven, and these are the people who went to hell.
And every time they struck a person, it also caused
Like near-death experience, which means that there will be a previous of what will happen when they pass away.
Veronica great pain. Then she supposedly saw Jesus, who she described as radiating in an overwhelming light. He led her back to her body and instructed her to share what she had seen. Veronica claimed that an angel then drove her car back home. When she arrived home, Veronica shouted that she had died and gone to hell. Friends and neighbors were not convinced, although they couldn't explain the melted parts on Veronica's car. Whatever happened, it was enough for Veronica to restore her abandoned faith and go on to have 3 children and a settled life. Howard Storm. Near-death experiences have a way of flipping a person's outlook on life. Just ask Howard Storm. He was an atheist who taught art at Northern Kentucky University and was married with children. By his own admission, he was not a very pleasant person to be around, and used his rage as a way to intimidate people, and was patronizing to those with religious beliefs. But all of this changed during a trip to Paris with his wife, when he was admitted to hospital with excruciating stomach pain. After being taken to hospital, he was diagnosed with perforation and needed surgery. Howard felt so unwell, he was convinced that his days were numbered, and said his last goodbyes to his wife before slipping into unconsciousness. This is what Howard said next happened. He claimed he saw himself levitate from his body and could see the visitors in his hotel room. He called out to his wife and roommate at the time, but they couldn't hear him. Then he heard voices in the distance, promising to fix him up if he followed them. He could only make out silhouettes, but once he came close, they retreated into a fog. He asked the voices who they were, but they wouldn't answer. The closer he got to the voices, the more urgent and aggressive they became, until eventually he was attacked by the beings behind them. This is how he described the attacks. My attempts to fight back only provoked greater merriment. They began to physically humiliate me in the most degrading ways. Every new assault brought howls of cacophony. Then at some point, they began to tear off pieces of my flesh. To my horror, I realized I was being taken apart and eaten alive, slowly, so that their entertainment would last as long as a person. Howard claimed a small voice told of bridled cruelty and passions. After the assault subsided, Howard claimed a small voice told him to pray. Even though he didn't know how to, he began to mutter religious phrases he heard before. The beings that attacked him immediately withdrew. They cursed him, but couldn't touch him, and backed away, leaving him alone, lying motionless in the darkness. He could see a light and something beckoning him to call out for Jesus to save him. The light expanded and washed over him, and he no longer felt weak, and he described it as a loving and accepting entity that knew him intimately and held no judgment towards him. It transported him away from the darkness, where he met other bright entities that showed him every moment of his life, the good and the bad. They also showed him a vision of a future where everyone, including animals, got along peacefully. When he woke up, Howard shared his near-death experience with the rest of the world. He converted to Christianity, wrote a book about his visions, and did a series of media interviews.
So Mickey Robinson, he was an atheist who converted to Christianity, and then him, like Howard, whatever his name is, he's an atheist and he converted to Christianity.
Views before eventually becoming a pastor.
And then he became a pastor.
Matthew Botsford. Matthew Botsford fell into a coma. During his ordeal, his heart stopped on 3 occasions, and it was 27 days before he woke up. When he did wake up, he described some extraordinary events. He said he had been held in mid-air by ancient black chains, and underneath him, he could see a glowing red pit made of lava with 4-legged creatures roaming around in agony. He heard tormented screams coming from the pit, and the lava began to rise up until it burned his flesh. He saw demons with black, oval eyes, covered in scales, with horns on their heads that smelled like rotten carcasses, who used their very long fingernails and sharp teeth to rip at his skin. At the time, he thought this was going to be his new existence. But then, a massive hand descended from above, and he could hear heavenly music followed by a brilliant white light. The hand pulled him up, and he heard a booming voice say, "It's not your time." At this point, Matthew supposedly woke up. Doctors were dumbfounded as they gave him a less than 30% chance of survival, and feared if he did survive, he would be in a permanent vegetative state. But somehow he had beaten the odds, and despite having to go through intense rehab to learn to walk again, within 2 years, he had achieved this, and even went on to write a children's book called Johnny Rocket. Incredibly, Matthew Botsford still has the bullet lodged in his head. George Ritchie. In 1943, 20-year-old George Ritchie was an Army private stationed in Texas. He was awaiting a transfer to Richmond to start medical studies when he suddenly fell ill with pneumonia and died in a Texas Army hospital. But as his dead body was being prepared for the morgue, the hospital ward detected slight movement in his chest and called for medical assistance, and an adrenaline shot was administered
So he
straight
passed away back in like in the 1990s at 84 years old, something like that.
into his heart. Miraculously, George, who had
And
been
that was like a near-death experience.
pronounced dead 9
It's
minutes
like a preview of what will happen when you eventually passed.
earlier, started to breathe and his heart started beating. When he woke up, he told one of the most important and credible near-death experiences ever documented. George claimed after he died, he was wandering around the hospital, unaware he was dead. He saw himself lying on the bed with hospital employees visiting his room. He also described moving around the hospital, trying to talk to people who seemed unaware he was there. Similar to previous near-death experiences, he also saw a man radiated by a pure bright light, whose presence was filled with unconditional love. In hindsight, George believed this was Jesus. The man asked George what he had done with his life, and when he was unable to provide a specific answer, he was led through different realms of the earth, where he was shown various spirits of those who had passed on. They were supposedly grouped together, seemingly linked by similarities in their living life. He also saw spirits who had taken their own lives, and that were desperately trying to apologize to their living loved ones, but they were oblivious to their presence. He was also shown a woman desperately reaching for a cigarette to smoke, but she was unable to grab it, and a bar filled with drinking sailors, and among them were shadows who tried to grab their shot glasses or control their actions while intoxicated. He figured these were the people who died from their vices. As they moved to an entirely new dimension, George claims that he witnessed what he described as a great battlefield, where angry, violent spirits attacked each other endlessly. They used only physical combat and left no injuries, nor did they bleed. They even performed sexually disturbing acts on one another and hurled abusive remarks, some of which George recognized as his own. After leaving what he later described as hell, George was taken to a massive library filled with important books about the universe. There resided the spirits who had dedicated their lives on Earth to research and creation above their selfish desires. However, like the spirits from their previous dimensions, they were supposedly not able to see God. The last realm he was taken to was a distant city of bright light, which George believed was heaven. But he wasn't allowed in. At this point, he was transported back into his body.
Yeah, so he was not allowed in. So I mean, he was in hell, but he was not allowed in heaven.
His near-death experience received so much attention that experts even verified the distance and location of the places he described. He wrote a book about his experience called Return from Tomorrow. He also went on to complete his medical studies and qualify as a doctor. George died of cancer in 2007 at the age of 84.
Okay.
So that's 5.
So he died of cancer at 84 in 2007. He had a near-death experience in his life of where you will end up after you pass. After you pass. And then there's other video that said this dude was in a near-death experience and he saw Hitler in hell. So this is what I wanted to show. I just wanted to show proof that the afterlife is real. And there's some are going to make in heaven, there's some is going to make in hell. And then there's some who are going to be reborn again without remembering their previous life. So for example, a video in here, there's 5 mysterious children who remember their past lives. Because I also remember in top 5, he had like a video saying that theories of what happened after you pass away, whether you be reborn as a animal or whether you will be born again without remembering your past life. But all the near-death experience that I have watched, it was either heaven or hell. And all the people who lost their loved one, they will be able to reunite with the family in the afterlife, like that woman Charla from the 700 Club interview that I played. The same thing can also apply from all the victims who lost the loved one in the 60s or 70s. This can apply to Beverly Burr. She was Catholic. Um, Her daughter mysteriously vanished in 1960, and then she died without knowing what happened to her daughter. But maybe God will make this possible that she will be reunited with her daughter. And then when Anne Marie Burr, hold on 1 second, 1 second. So,
Awake and one death row. I haven't always thought it's Ted Bundy.
so, and then when she passes away, maybe she will also be reunited with her parent and her sibling, Hen, who mysteriously vanished. So, 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 this is just to show that not everybody are going to make it to heaven. And all these people were celebrating Charlie Kirk's death. When you pass away, you probably will end up there. I'm just saying, I'm not saying that it's possible, but it's whatever. That's all I gotta say.